Hi everyone, this is Melinda Fleckenstein, and this is my case study for EDL850 VA on Internet use violations. So we start with Category 1, which is problem identification and analysis. What do you know? So starting with this case study, we know that Slattery Steno High School is in an affluent area of a large city and is considered one of the most prestigious high schools in the state. Dr. Harvey Smith has been the principal for 9 years at this high school. He is a very respected individual by both parents and students, and he is focused on maintaining that high reputation. Dr. Smith was recognized as Principal of the Year in the state 2 years ago, so he is a very prestigious principal as well. Miss Robin Tate is the teacher in this case study, and she is in her 2nd year of teaching. She is a little bit older than a typical 1st or 2nd year teacher as she went on with her education a little bit further. So she is in her 2nd year of teaching during this situation, and she teaches upper level science classes. So she does have a rigorous class schedule. She does run a strict and rigorous classroom, so she's very strict in her classroom, and her classes are very difficult, which tends to cause a little bit of problems with some of her students because her students like to be straight A students. Dr. Smith has discussed with Ms. Tate methods to increase positive interactions with the students in her class, but as of yet, she has not successfully implemented these suggestions. Parents and students have both complained about Ms. Tate's class workload and poor instruction methods. And Ms. Tate received an email alerting her to a specific website for a personal message after she got home from a long weekend. The website that it sends her to is a Facebook page, including many comments that are disturbing to Ms. Tate. The last comment is the comment that disturbs her the most, and that comment is, "Who wants Ms. Tate to disappear?" This upsets Ms. Tate, and she calls Dr. Smith right away. Dr. Smith looks at the page, he truly feels that it is a prank, and asks Ms. Tate if there's any student that she can specifically think of that is unhappy with her. Ms. Tate right away jumps and says that she feels that it is William Hall that probably did this, and Ms. Tate feels threatened enough to not stay at her home. She's afraid that to Ms. Tate to disappear means to kill her, and so she does not want to stay at home. She travels the 3 hours to stay with her parents that night. Second part of Category 1 is, what do we need to know? What do we need to know yet to solve this case? First was the page created by an individual or a group of individuals? Have others, parents or students, commented or posted on the page? Has there been any comments on the page? What other information is on the page? It tells in the case study information about Ms. Tate. What is this information? We aren't really given that. Are there any parents that are specifically upset with Ms. Tate enough to do this? What is the school policy on cyberbullying? Because this could be that type of an issue. Have students learned about proper digital etiquette and consequences of cyberbullying? Have they been taught this? And was the page set up as a prank, or is it a true threat to Ms. Tate? Also, does the school have the ability to track emails or determine if the page was created on a school computer? Is the page still available to view, or has it been taken down? Was the individual that created it put it up for a very short time and then got it removed, or is it still there? Has Ms. Tate made an effort to implement the suggestions that Dr. Smith gave her to increase positive interactions with the students? Has she been working on improving her class? And is this a case of libel, which could be turned into the law enforcement? So then, problem identification. Based on the information given, Ms. Tate feels threatened, and appropriate steps need to be taken to identify who created the page, if it was a prank or a true threat, and finally then reprimand the individual or groups of individuals that made this page. This can also be used as a learning tool for all students at the school to demonstrate the consequences of libel and cyberbullying. So then we go on to Category 2, which is the proposed plan of action with appropriate strategies for implementation. So here I've lined them out step by step, plan of action and strategies for implementation in the order based on number of how I would go about them. first thing I would do immediately is to contact the district superintendent so that they know the situation. Dr. Smith is the principal at the high school, so he should automatically contact the superintendent so that they know what situation is occurring. And the superintendent may be able to provide insight on a better way to handle the situation. Next, I would contact the IT department to determine can they trace the email and the creator of the page and set up a time to meet with them to evaluate their findings and what they have discovered there. Third, if the page has not been taken down and it is still public, I would get it taken down by contacting Facebook or the proper authorities to get that page taken off so that it doesn't do any more damage to Mrs. Tate's or Miss Tate's reputation. Then I would have a meeting with Miss Tate. As it says in the case study, they would meet the next morning. So meet with Miss Tate. I would make sure to take detailed notes of this meeting, record everything, discuss any documentation that she may have of students' behavior in class. Maybe some of that may stand out a little bit. Discuss any students that she feels there have been a significant problem with, if there's any students that stand out besides William Hall. Also remind Miss Tate to not jump to conclusions and accuse students, as her accusations could be considered slander if she speaks about this to others. If she starts talking to other teachers or other individuals, blaming William Hall, for making this, it could be considered slandered by ruining his reputation or working against him. Next is to ensure, Miss Tate, that you are taking the situation seriously and doing everything you can to get to the bottom of it. Make sure she understands that you're not just taking this and blowing it by, that you are working on it. And if Miss Tate still feels there is the possibility of physical harm, place her on paid administrative leave until the problem can be resolved. If after cooling off overnight she does not feel that she's in any physical danger, have her back in the classroom and continue teaching. Fifth, I would meet with William Hall and any other students that Miss Tate mentions to see if they know anything about the page. Watch their body language, and make sure to take notes as you meet with them. Meet with each student separate from each other and from Miss Tate, so that there isn't any biased or communication there as well. Number 6, I would review the cyberbullying policy of the school district. If there is no policy in place, this needs to be addressed immediately at the next school board meeting. There needs to be a cyberbullying place in the student handbook and faculty handbook as well. I would then conduct an assembly with all students, and this would be that next morning when school comes back, to discuss cyberbullying and its consequences. We don't have to right away talk about exactly what happened, but just bring up the topic of cyberbullying and what it can do and its consequences. Explain to students the Megan Meyer Cyberbullying Prevention Act and the consequences with that of cyberbullying. And then at the end of the assembly, towards the end, after discussing cyberbullying and its consequences, briefly explain the situation, leaving out names. Don't discuss names. It might help other students to come forward a little bit, asking if they know anything, to visit with Dr. Smith or another teacher if they feel more comfortable with another teacher. But to speak out about that, because that cyberbullying has many consequences to it. If students do come forward with information, investigate what they tell you. Make sure that you investigate every student's claim. You might actually learn about things that you didn't know that are cyberbullying situations, but not necessarily with this specific case. So investigate all of them. If this information that you receive leads to the discovery of the individual creating the Facebook page, discipline that student per school policy. The discipline, my view, would be to include a verbal apology to Miss Tate. A verbal apology is important. It makes the student accountable for their actions. And suspension from school. If this is the case, suspension from school, due process does need to be given and the right steps need to be taken for suspension from school. And then possibly report to law enforcement. If it was serious enough that Miss Tate felt extremely threatened, it's very likely that this needs to be turned over to the law enforcement. If no students come forward and there is no evidence discovered through the IT department to lead to the individual creating the page, I would definitely report this to law enforcement, turn over all information that I have collected, because they likely have better tools and are able to do this a little bit easier than we can. And then finally, follow up with Miss Tate. Always good to follow up with her. Discuss possible removal of the student from her classroom. If the student is determined, possibly remove them from her classroom. It might make her feel better and maybe the student as well. Review strategies for implementation to help improve positive interactions between Miss Tate and her students. Help her to become a better teacher to have those positive interactions with the students. And then I would also assign Miss Tate a mentor to help improve her classroom structure. I think it's always important, especially for second, third year teachers, to have a mentoring teacher within the district to help show them the ropes, help them to communicate with, so that they can build their classroom to be the best that it can be. So, category 3 is resolution of the problem. So, in promoting the academic success and personal well-being of every student, it is important not to jump to conclusions. I feel I resolved this problem by first contacting the IT department to see if they could get information on the source of the page developer. Second, I met with Miss Tate, William, and any other students that Miss Tate feels she had issues with. Next, I had an assembly with all students to explain cyberbullying and its consequences. This will hopefully help in discovering who made the page, as well as prevent further problems with cyberbullying. If the perpetrator is determined, appropriate disciplinary measures are taken, including a verbal apology to Miss Tate. If the perpetrator is not determined based on the school's investigation, it will need to be turned over to law enforcement so that they can hopefully find the individual. Finally, a follow-up with Miss Tate takes place. In this meeting, a review of strategies to help her in her classroom and the assignment of a mentoring teacher for her to work with will occur. This is to help her become a better teacher to ensure the success and well-being of all the students. Category 4 then is to debrief the problem by reflection. So what was I thinking? In this process as I began working, my first thought was, what are the procedures that we have in place at our district for a situation like this? What would I do? The second thing I was thinking is I need to contact the superintendent so that we can work together and so he or she is aware. The chain of commands, anyone above needs to be contacted. How do we determine who made this page and why they made it? And then what all types of documentation do I need? It is very important that we always document everything and have the paper trail for that, so I needed to determine what types of documentation do I need. What was I feeling? First, I thought Miss Tate may be jumping to conclusions before facts are established. And as a teacher, this is very easy to do, especially if you have a student that you kind of butt heads with all the time. It's easy to jump to conclusions, and that's not the thing we want to do. I was also very frustrated on why would someone take out their anger by making a page like this. These types of things, I'm not a big Facebook fan. Why would somebody take out their anger like this? And then I also kind of felt concerned for Miss Tate. Was she really physically in danger, or was it a prank? I just kind of had a lot of concern for Miss Tate. And then finally, what was I valuing through this case study? First, the privacy of both the students and Miss Tate. The page for Miss Tate, it said, had a lot of personal information on it. That can be very bad for her reputation if that information is incorrect, for sure. So the privacy of the individuals. Safety of all involved, both the students and the teacher. We don't want Miss Tate jumping to conclusions and then taking that out on her students in the classroom if she thinks one did it without figuring out exactly who. And then finally, I value accountability. This is something I strongly value in everything, is accountability. This includes the individual that made the page, but also Miss Tate in her classroom being accountable for what she teaches, how she teaches it, and the relationships with her students. Also with this, there are some issues that remain unresolved or some things we should investigate a little bit further. First, I would revisit the school cyberbullying and acceptable use policy. Make sure that there is a policy in place, the acceptable use policy, especially if this page happened to be created on a school computer. What is the protocol that's put in place for a situation like this if it were to happen again? Make sure that that protocol is listed out so it is easier next time and solution can be discovered right away. The next one is, should law enforcement be involved from the beginning? Depending on if it was a prank or if it was a true threat, I mean, do we need to involve law enforcement right away? Should I contact them right away? Make sure everything is documented and on file for future reference. Make sure I have all that documentation. And then, of course, just continuing to work with Miss Tate to improve in her classroom. Then the last category is another reflection, but reflect by providing evidence that you, as the education leader at the building level, applies knowledge that promotes the success of every student by acting with integrity, fairness, and in an ethical manner. So we start with the success of every student by acting with integrity. I felt that I did this by getting the page about Miss Tate taken down so no others could view it and possibly get the wrong information about Miss Tate. I was able to use this situation as a teaching moment to inform all students of the consequences that can arise from cyberbullying, and helping Miss Tate to improve her classroom by developing strategies for her to implement for more positive interactions with her students. In the case of fairness, promoting the success of every student by acting with fairness, the first was not jumping to conclusions and automatically just pulling William Hall in and accusing him of making it, but to get all the facts behind it before that. Investigating all leads provided by students or possibly other individuals, faculty member, parents maybe. Turning the investigation over to law enforcement. If we cannot determine who made the page through our investigation, it's still fair to Miss Tate and the students, all students, to determine who made that. So if we can't, turn that over to law enforcement so they hopefully can. And then finally, allowing Miss Tate to decide, does she feel safe enough to return to the classroom? Before we determine who developed the page, she should be able to decide if she feels comfortable enough in doing that. And then finally, the success of every student by acting in an ethical manner. I felt that I acted in an ethical manner by making sure to take notes and document all discussions with Miss Tate, students, and anyone else involved. Make sure to documenting them, taking detailed notes so that the actual information, not interpreted information, is available. Reminding Miss Tate and students about libel and slander and the consequences of those, knowing what you should and should not or can and cannot say or write and post about others. Ensure due process is followed before the student is suspended in the event a student is determined to have made the page. So make sure that due process is followed so that that student has their chance to defend themselves in the situation. So that concludes my presentation of this case study and how I would solve it. Thank you for watching.